All right. I think I'm live. Hi, everyone. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Listen, I got this very interesting question from a church leader, and I wanted to take a moment to answer it. Um, Obviously, I talk a lot about legal matters for church. I am the church attorney after all, so that's what I talk about. And I'm grateful that over 25 years, I've had a chance to help churches, sometimes in a time of crisis, right? Because I often say nobody calls their attorney just to say hello. Usually there's a legal matter that comes up. But also, a big part of my heart is to be able to help churches operate in such a way that it allows them to grow and expand and do the kingdom work that operating properly in this legal ecosystem, right, on earth will allow churches to do. So, the question that I got is, what is church compliance anyway? Like, I see the work that you do and it seems amazing, but can you break down for me this whole idea of church compliance, what it is, why it matters? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. What is church compliance? Why does it matter? It's sort of church law 101, right? So, in short, when it comes to legal operations for church, some churches maybe recognize that they live in this legal ecosystem when they go to do certain things. Thanks for the heart. Come on in. I'm happy to talk about this. So, we're talking about issues that arise on the local level, on the state level, on the federal level. And then there's one more arena that I want to talk about as well, and that's the denominational level. May apply to some. There's a lot of independent churches, but if you operate in a denomination, this is really critical for you to know as well. So, starting on the local level. So, one of the things you might think about is zoning laws, right? So, unfortunately, I was called into this situation where a church, they didn't have legal counsel. They worked with a realtor to locate a space to rent. Right. So they put down their money because, we've got significant deposits, and they moved in. They got everything set up as far as the seating and the band area and all the things in place, and so they were opening, and unfortunately, people got there on a Sunday morning. There was a sign on the door. They were prohibited from going into the building, and they were shut down. That spot was shut down. And why? Because that location was not zoned to be a church. It was zoned for commercial, but not for churches specifically. And that can be a big issue for churches. But if you don't know, you don't know, right? So zoning laws are churches are required to follow zoning laws. Sometimes there can be issues about why there's churches allowed in certain areas and not in others, and I won't get into that. But zoning laws are under that umbrella of legal compliance. We have to be in the areas that are zoned, and knowing that is really critical. Another area that's local, when I say local, I mean county by county, city by city, is property tax exemption. That all happens generally on the local level. So a lot of churches will assume that if the church is in the property, or let's say the church has purchased a property, and they just assume that the property is going to be tax exempt if it's owned by a church. But that's not how it works. It's not automatic, and the property tax exemption doesn't transfer with the property. The property tax exemption goes with the applicant, the person, the church that has applied for it. So if you buy a property as a church and you move in, you still have to apply for property tax exemption. And I will say, it used to be perfunctory. It used to be like, oh, okay, a church is there, check the box, no problem. But over time, and especially with municipalities wanting to guard their resources, their money, they do a lot more investigation and to ensure that the property is actually used for a tax exempt purpose, and not only just that it's being inhabited by a tax exempt organization. So these zoning issues, property tax exemption, all those kinds of things come under the umbrella of local compliance issues, right? Legal issues on the local level. So then if we talk about compliance, what it means on the state level, the state is really where we see that each state has laws. So we call them statutory. Each state law governs what the requirements are to incorporate in that state. So the process of incorporation is in and of itself statutory. It's governed by state. So some states say, well, in order to incorporate here, you have to have X number of board members. Some state that X may be 3, maybe 4, maybe some other number. It may give certain age limits. It may say the maximum number of individuals or the minimum number that you have. It talks about board responsibilities, board composition, bylaws requirements. And that can be a big area for churches. All of that generally comes under the state and also state courts, right? So God really captured my heart to be the church attorney through my work when I clerked for the chief judge of our state's highest court. And a case came before the court where a local church, a church in the state, was being sued by a national denomination. So this all happens on the state level. So all of the cases that come before the state that involves churches, that becomes law within that state. And so churches have to have an awareness of those things. And again, it's kind of unfair because how many pastors are going to be searching through case law, right? That's why I exist to do the work that I do. But this next level that we're talking about, again, is state requirements. And then the third level of church compliance, what that means is on the federal level. And so I think there's a broader awareness of this because this is the Internal Revenue Service. The Internal Revenue Service has a specific division that is that actually deals with tax exempt organizations and government entities. So TE/GE is what that you often will see, but it has a specific division that deals with churches and tax exempt organizations. So a lot of the issues that come up that involve, let's say, some of the things that I highlighted in my last video, because the IRS just listed out these areas of compliance that they are putting resources to come 2025. They are focusing on having more resources in the area for tax exempt organizations to make sure that they are managing that tax exempt revenue in the proper way. So this is a huge area. I'm actually highlighting it in an upcoming webinar. Actually, this webinar is coming up this month, so it's a free webinar. I really encourage you to sign up. I'm going to get more into the weeds, but this area of how churches operate under the federal area is really critical. So that's where the IRS is. It's the Supreme Court. And we've been seeing recent rulings that really churches need to pay attention to, the Department of Labor and other federal agencies. So that's all under the umbrella of the federal arm, federal considerations. And then if you are a part of a denomination, you also have some regulations to contend with because most denominations have what's called their book of discipline. And that book of discipline is generally hundreds and hundreds of pages, and it outlines operations within that denomination. And I will tell you, courts will often defer to the denomination's book of discipline. So if it's in the book of discipline and you're a part of that denomination, you should assume you're going to be required to follow the rules of that denomination. And that could include property matters. That could include what is often called a trust clause provision. And the trust clause will say that the property, that no matter when you bought it, no matter whose name is on the deed, no matter whether you bought it even before you were part of the denomination, often the trust clause will say that property will remain the property of the denomination, period. As the young people say, point blank, period. Right? So it really is important to be aware of all of these areas of the ecosystem in which churches exist. So I wanted to answer that question that came from a social media follower, and that often comes up with church leaders. So join the upcoming webinar. we're going to be talking about the tips and trends for 2025 that every church needs to be aware of. So sign up. It's a free webinar. I don't always do free webinars, but I'm wanting to really feeling that in this really interesting time in which we live, I want to make sure that we provide as many resources as we can to you. So make sure you get in the room. We'll put the link below and I will see you there. Bye.